All right, so I still am annoyed the Supremes did not give Mr. Trump the birthright citizenship he wanted. And there are other issues, too. We got the great Jonathan Turley, constitutional law attorney, Fox News contributor, author of Rage of the Republic. Just as an aside, you were just telling me this. The framers were not opposed to people creating wealth and developing wealth. It was big government they were opposed to.
That's right. I mean, you have Gavin Newsom was saying that the framers would have supported the billionaires' tax. I have a column out in the Wall Street Journal saying that's exactly wrong, that the framers were great believers in capitalism. The Wealth of Nations came out the same time as our Declaration of Independence. They embraced it. Some of our framers would be billionaires today. People like Robert Morris would be a billionaire today. They believed that property was a God-given right, that you had a right to make things and make property and assume wealth. They were against the concentration of power when it comes to the government in any one branch.
Yeah, sure they would. Big government socialism. I mean, the whole thing was kind of a rebellion against monarchical power that they didn't have. So on the birthright citizenship thing, okay, you're the attorney, I'm not. I just don't understand. It's because it's big business. People transporting women in who are pregnant, deliberately knowing that if the kid is born in the United States, I mean, it's a way of getting around our immigration laws, and it's a way of getting around our border security. I didn't understand what the Supremes did on this.
Well, you know, if the Supreme Court voted on birthright citizenship as a practice, I think it would be overwhelming. I mean, this country is a ship of fools in embracing this practice. Most countries around the world have rejected it. Countries that had it rescinded it. But what the question was before the court is, what does the 14th Amendment say? And on that, Roberts and Barrett broke with the liberals in saying, we believe it does include birthright citizenship. Now, there were very good arguments on both sides. This is an issue of good faith disagreement, and they just read that more, that provision more broadly. But Thomas and Alito made some very powerful points and said, look, this was about recognizing the citizenship and the rights of freed slaves.
Right.
They obviously had no thought of this. Now, Kavanaugh...
People in those days weren't thinking about anything like what practices in recent years.
No, but, you know, Roberts responded to that by saying, look, yeah, times have changed, but the Constitution remains the same. So, but Kavanaugh, in his opinion, says, look, I think he agreed that the 14th Amendment does not include birthright citizenship. So remember, this is a one-vote margin. And he suggested Congress should pass a law that bans it. Now, what would happen is that would give essentially a second bite at the apple. If that law is challenged, it could go back in front of the Supreme Court. It may, in fact, be a different court by the time they hear it. But this is a razor-thin margin. It was closer than many people thought.
Well, I loved it. I thought the Federal Trade Commission decision was very good. It gives the president his rightful executive authority. I think they kind of punted on the Federal Reserve. But Lisa Cook is either guilty or not guilty of many primary residential mortgages. So we'll give her a day in court. I get that. I get that, too. Come back to this issue. The concentration of wealth is not a bad thing. And in fact, there's a story in the Wall Street Journal today, just in the last 30 or 40 seconds. We're creating more millionaires by the minute and by the hour than any other country in the world remotely. More millionaires. Now, why is that a bad thing?
It's not a bad thing. And in Rage of the Republic, one of the things I talk about is that the framers believed that you had to be economically independent to be truly free. That's why they recognize Adam Smith's theory as the perfect companion for their political theory. It was the combination of the free market and that political theory that made us this republic, the most successful democracy in history. Free markets meant true freedom for people, and they believed wholeheartedly in that. So these arguments from the left, and particularly from Newsom about the framers, is completely bonkers. It is diametrically and demonstrably opposite of what they are suggesting.
I keep calling it freedom and free enterprise.
That's right.
Freedom and free enterprise. It's right there in the Declaration of Independence. Terrific. Anyway, the book is Rage in the Republic. Appreciate that. Maybe you'll come back on radio. We can talk some more about it.
You bet.
Jonathan Turley, nobody better. I appreciate it.